Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. So if you have been here since day one, literally day one, my first upload on this channel, I did a huge book haul and talked about a lot of the books on my physical TBR. And one author in particular that I have a lot of books from is Stephen King. And so today is finally the day that I'm going to do a vlog to see how many Stephen King books I can read in a week because it's October, and so it is the perfect time to get into some Stephen King. Now, I have quite a few of his books on my physical TBR, so I'm not sure exactly how many I'll get to in this video or which ones, but I do know which one I'm going to be starting off with, and that is Mr. Mercedes. So, Mr. Mercedes is part of the Bill Hodges trilogy. And a little bit ago, I read The Outsider, which is also a Stephen King novel that features Holly Gibney. And that book actually takes place after this one and refers to Bill Hodges a little bit. So I have put a little bit of a pause on picking up other Stephen King books until I could start this trilogy because I didn't want to have any more spoilers, although I am really, really interested in reading more of Holly's stories. So I definitely wanted to start with this trilogy on my physical TBR first. So I'm definitely going to be reading this first book. And I don't think this is really a spoiler because this killer is called Mr. Mercedes, but Bill Hodges, at the time that this book is taking place, has retired as a detective. And there's one killer that he never caught who is called the Mercedes Killer or Mr. Mercedes. And one day he receives a mysterious letter that makes him want to start to look into this killer again to see if he can catch Mr. Mercedes once and for all. So I'm really, really excited to get into this book, and I will definitely let you know what I'm thinking if I have an update or if I reach the 50% mark. All right, folks, I am halfway through Mr. Mercedes, and so far I am really enjoying this. As much as you can enjoy something that also simultaneously makes you extremely uncomfortable. So I do have to say, Mr. King, you are disgusting. And I don't know if I want to know how your brain comes up with these things. I really have been curious because there's some pretty intense scenes that have made me very uncomfortable to read. How Stephen King gets himself into these headspaces to write these truly just vile, disturbing characters. I mean, I feel like out of the Stephen King books that I've read so far, which it's not a huge exhaustive list, but I have read a few Stephen King books. This one so far is the one that has definitely made me the most uncomfortable. One thing that was a surprise for me with this book is that I didn't know it was going to be dual POV and that we were going to get not only Bill Hodges' point of view, but also our murderer's point of view, which I think is interesting. I like that take on this type of novel because I think normally it's more whodunit style where the big reveal is who the killer is. But with Mr. Mercedes, we know who the killer is, and we're waiting to see how these two people are going to come together and how Bill Hodges will eventually figure out who the killer is because he doesn't know, but we obviously know. Now, I don't know if you would consider this a spoiler, but I do want to mention what one of the things is that has made me the most uncomfortable in this book. And I'm sure if you look up trigger warnings for this, it would clearly say that this is one of the top ones. So I don't personally think it's a spoiler, but just in case you do, maybe skip ahead a little bit. But there is a lot of discussion about incest in this book, and it has literally been making my skin crawl. There are a lot of things about our murderer that make my skin crawl, and a lot of the things he says, the way that he thinks, makes me so, so uncomfortable. But that particular aspect of his story is extremely uncomfortable. So I'm really enjoying the book overall, but if you are going to pick it up, just know that that is a big part of his story, and it's definitely disgusting. Now, when I'm looking for horrors or thrillers, I do kind of prefer books that elicit an emotional response for me. So those things would never be a reason why I'm like, I'm not enjoying the book. If I felt like they were just put in to be gratuitous and unnecessary, I might feel that they detract from the book. But in this case, I don't feel like they're detracting from the book. They are just making me extremely uncomfortable. So just wanted to put that out there. But one of my favorite things so far is that our detective character, Bill Hodges, is really a three-dimensional character in this book. I've read some other books that are supposed to be like detective based or crime procedurals, and sometimes I feel like the detectives can fall a little flat because they're not normally the main focus of the story. Normally, the story is more focused on whatever they're trying to solve or the criminal they're trying to catch. But I feel like Stephen King does such a good job, not only with Bill Hodges, but with all of his characters, of making them feel very real and very three dimensional. None of them feel like they're just caricatures of what you would expect in this type of novel. And as per usual, I will just reiterate that Stephen King's writing is really top notch. I always enjoy his writing when I read it. I feel like it flows super well. So I definitely think in terms of high quality writing, I will always recommend Stephen King's books because he really is just an amazing writer. And so I've been enjoying this one just as much as I've enjoyed his other books in the past. Now, I did get a little over halfway, and I think my Kindle is saying that I have about 3.5 hours left in the book because although I do have a physical copy, y'all know being able to read this on Kindle makes it a lot more accessible so I can take it with me more frequently. I love to read on my lunch break, so it's a lot easier to just throw my Kindle in my bag. So, fortunately, this afternoon I have a hair appointment, which I clearly desperately need. These are getting a little long, and so I should be there for at least 2 hours, and I do normally take my Kindle with me. I talk to my hairdresser, but obviously there's times where I'm just sitting and processing. So I definitely try to get some reading in during those times. So I'm hoping that I will make a lot of really good progress on this for the rest of the day and potentially even finish it tonight. But as soon as I have finished this, I will come back to you with my final thoughts and my overall rating, and we will pick our next Stephen King book to get started on. All right, friends, I have finished Mr. Mercedes, and for me, this is going to be a 5-star read, which is so, so exciting. I mean, I already knew that I really enjoyed Stephen King's writing, but I really, really, really enjoyed this book. And a lot of what I said in my earlier update definitely still stood throughout the rest of the book. But I really felt like once I hit that 50% mark, the pace really picked up for me, and I was really, really invested. I didn't want to put the book down, and I, during my appointment, read a part of the book that was pretty upsetting. So I did have to put it down for a little bit, but I finished it and I absolutely loved it. Now, I did take a quick peek at Goodreads, and I saw that there were a lot of people who had actually rated this much lower than some of Stephen King's other works. And they said that this really wasn't as strong as his other works. And I've openly admitted in this video that I haven't read that much of his work so far. So for me, that makes me really excited because it seems like I thought this was really good, and this may be one of his lower rated books. So it may just be all up from here. But for me, at this point in time, with what I've read from him, this was a 5-star read for me, and I really enjoyed it. I had no idea that Stephen King could be not only so disgusting with the content that was in this book, but also so wholesome. I don't know how he managed to create a book that both literally made my skin crawl, but also brought tears to my eyes with how beautiful some of the relationships were in the book. And I just really, really appreciated that. I think the juxtaposition of the relationships in the book, the ones that were negative versus the ones that were positive, really made them both stand out more strongly and made my feelings towards them stronger in both scenarios as well. So I thought that was executed really, really beautifully. And I definitely don't want to give any spoilers. I don't want to give anything away, but who knew that the power of friendship was really going to be the thing that Stephen King would put so much emphasis on in his book. So I was very satisfied with the ending. I thought that everything turned out really nicely, and I felt like where the book leaves off makes me very, very excited for book 2 in the trilogy. So I'm not going to pick that up in this video just because I want a little bit of variety. I don't want to only read Stephen King's detective mysteries, but I am definitely going to be continuing the trilogy very, very soon. So overall, Mr. Mercedes was definitely a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed this, and I've been talking about this a lot with people that I know in real life. I feel like I can't shut up about this, so I would highly recommend this. I really enjoyed it, and I think as far as mysteries, thrillers, and horrors go, this is definitely up there for me. It made me extremely uncomfortable, but it was also such a moving book, so I would highly recommend this. And with Mr. Mercedes done, if you watched my TBR jar video for October, you would know that If It Bleeds by Stephen King is on my physical TBR for the month. And this is actually a collection of novellas or short stories by Stephen King. So I figured I would pick this up and go ahead and read the first short story in this before I decide what my next read is going to be for the vlog. So the first short story in here is Mr. Harrigan's Phone, and the only context that I have about this is that it says an intergenerational friendship has a disturbing afterlife. So I have no idea what it's going to be about, but I did peek and it is about 90 pages, so I should finish this pretty quickly. And then I think I want to pick up one of Stephen King's true horror novels. So I will finish this novella and get back to you with my thoughts, and then we'll pop into our next read. All right, I'm back with a super quick update because I finished Mr. Harrigan's Phone. And this short story or novella really, really surprised me, to be honest with you. I caught myself tearing up and starting to cry at part of this, which totally caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to feel that way, but Stephen King in this novella did such a good job of making you feel so connected to the characters. I don't know how he did that so incredibly well in less than 90 pages, but I honestly felt so connected to them and to the friendship between our two main characters that we're following in the novella. We have an older gentleman who is very rich named Mr. Harrigan, and a young boy that is named Craig that have an unlikely friendship. And I just thought the story really kind of started out beautifully. I really liked seeing their friendship develop, even though it was in so few pages. And then I really did have some of that like spine chilling feeling when some of the things started to happen in the novella. I don't want to spoil it because it is pretty short, so there's not a lot of room for me to give details without giving major points of the novella away. But ultimately, I did really, really enjoy it. It wasn't as scary as obviously one of his full length novels, but I thought that the direction he went with the mystery that was happening, with the kind of horrifying part of the story that was happening, was really interesting. And I also thought that there was some pretty interesting commentary being made on the use of media like phones and the internet, and how we can fall into using them even when it's at our own detriment or at the detriment of others. So I thought that it was a really interesting story and I really enjoyed it. I'm probably not going to rate it individually as a standalone, but it does make me really excited to read the rest of the novellas that are included in If It Bleeds. I believe there's like 5. Yeah, in total, there's 5 in here, and The Life of Chuck is the second one. I'm pretty sure The Life of Chuck is told backwards chronologically, or there's something interesting about the timeline that the life of Chuck is told in. So I'm really excited to read that. And then I'm pretty sure If It Bleeds is technically the second Holly Gibney story, where The Outsider is the first one, and I've already read that. So I am really excited to continue her story. There's actually only 4 in here. There's 4 and then an author's note, but I'm really, really excited to continue reading these, and I think they're all about 90 pages or less. Looks like If It Bleeds might be a little longer, but that definitely makes sense with it being another installment in Holly's story. So I am excited to continue this, but I'm not going to do that in this video, although this is on my TBR for the month, so I will be finishing this before the end of October, and I am enjoying just getting these like little snippets from this book, so I'll look forward to picking this up in between my reads for the rest of the month. But that being said, I need to pick my next book. And when I think Stephen King, there is one horror movie that really stands out to me as one that I watched when I was super young, and it's one of the first horror movies that I remember watching. And you're probably thinking it's The Shining, and it's not. It's actually Pet Sematary, and this is one of my all-time favorite horror movies, so I'm really excited to get into this and read it. So once I get to the halfway point in this, I will update you, and this one is also on Kindle Unlimited in case you're wanting to read it as well and you have that, so it is accessible there as well, but I'm super excited to get started on this. Hey friends, I am here for a final update, and it has been a few days since my last update. Honestly, I have been insanely busy, and I honestly was really kind of struggling just to find time to read. I don't necessarily feel like I'm in a slump in the sense of not wanting to pick up a book and read, but I more so have just been really struggling to find time to actually sit down and read. And most days lately, the only time I've had available to read has been right before bed, and I've literally been falling asleep and dropping my book on my face. So it's just been a little bit of a struggle. But in the last few days, I have finished Pet Sematary, and honestly, I am so, so happy that I read this. I have had an overall kind of idea of how this book went based on the movie, the really old one that came out. I say really old. It was literally just like the late 80s that the original movie came out. But I basically had an overview of the movie and the plot from that, but reading it was just an entirely different experience. And I was actually just talking to a friend about this because they recently picked up Mr. Mercedes, which I read at the beginning of this vlog, and they were talking about just some of the things that Stephen King writes and just wondering what the heck goes on in this man's brain. And that is so, so real, truly. But I really, really enjoyed reading this. I feel like there's a lot that I could pick apart if I did kind of a spoilery section, not pick apart in a bad way, but I think this book could have a lot of really good conversation around it, especially with the ending. So if you have read this and you have thoughts on how the book ended, feel free to drop that down below. Just, maybe give a spoiler warning if you're talking about your theories about what happened after it ended. But I feel like although it is an ambiguous ending, King definitely tells us where it's going to go, and I think it's really obvious where it's going to go based on other clues that are given at the end of the book. But overall, I really enjoyed this reading experience. There were so many things that King included in this book that made me so uncomfortable. We start dealing with pretty gory deaths right off the bat in this book, and the way that King writes tension and inner turmoil is just so, so impressive to me. I have not connected with an author in this way, and the way that he depicts that inner turmoil using literary devices, the way that he shows someone's thoughts racing, he really good at doing and not just telling, and I could really feel a lot of the characters' emotions coming through the pages, coming through the writing, and I think that's why I enjoy reading his books so, so much. And there were just so many things throughout this book that really left me speechless, that left me wondering where we were going to go next.
And the thing that I was anticipating happening happened much, much later in the book than I thought it would, based on the movie and kind of the vague remembrance that I had of this story. And so I literally felt like I was on the edge of my seat as we got towards the end of the book, and I kept looking at the page count and thinking, well, I'm at 80%. I don't have that much left of the book. Is this going to happen? Is he going to go through with this? And I think that's 100% intentional, because the character is also wrestling with that and going through that turmoil and questioning his own sanity, and he's hemming and hawing and should I, shouldn't I? But ultimately, I think you know that based on the pull of the Pet Cemetery, we know what's going to happen and how the book is going to end up. And can I just say that ending, how things unfold, is so heartbreaking to read, and it's done in such a concise way. I really thought that part of the book would be a larger chunk of the book, and I thought it would be kind of the scarier part of the book, but I honestly think the build up to that was so much scarier than when those things finally did happen at the end of the book. And if you're not familiar with the story, I'm sorry. I probably sound like I'm talking about nonsense, but just know that there are some bad things that happen throughout this book. You unpack some folks' inner trauma throughout the book. You really have an understanding of how different characters in the book relate with death because of the way that King portrays them and their backstories and their history. You really come to empathize with some of the characters. And then it all builds up to this question of, is he going to, or isn't he going to, with regard to burying something in the pet cemetery. And that moment, that drawn out tension, is just so, it's so tangible. It feels so real. I felt so invested in that part of the story, and so I really enjoyed this reading experience overall. It did take me a little bit longer to read this than I expected, just because, like I mentioned, I was so insanely busy. But I really enjoyed this, and I did end up rating it 5 stars overall. And this has really given me the itch to just continue to read Stephen King. And I'm gonna have to put a lot of effort forth to not just read Stephen King for the rest of the year, because my reading experience in this vlog has been so enjoyable. And I'm glad that I read both one of his true kind of horrors as well as more of his detective mysteries, which I still think are pretty horrific. But I like the way that you see different characters portrayed through the two different types of books. I would argue that they're almost different genres, even though they're written by the same author and they have a lot of the same elements. There's definitely a difference in more of the crime procedural detective novel versus something like Pet Cemetery, which is truly just a horror novel. But I really loved both of them, and I guess we'll do a little recap with that. So, Pet Cemetery got 5 stars for me. We started the vlog with Mr. Mercedes, which is the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy, and this also got 5 stars. Sorry if the audio quality is a little bit different. My wired mic died, unfortunately, so we're back to just the phone mic. But as I was saying, I also gave Mr. Mercedes 5 stars. I've still been thinking about this book constantly, and I also have a couple of friends and family who have recently read this book, and so it's been really nice just getting to talk about this book and all of the things included in it and how we felt about them and what comments we felt like Stephen King was trying to make by including certain things. So it has just been really nice to connect with people over this book. I really think it is such a well done book. I really loved this, and it's just been fun to get to talk to people about it. So not only was this a 5 star reading experience for me, but the experience of getting to connect with other people over this book has also been a really great experience that I have loved. And then the last thing that we read was a novella or short story from If It Bleeds, which was Mr. Harrigan's Phone. And I didn't rate this one just because this is a compendium and I haven't finished reading the other short stories in here. But if I were to rate that one as a standalone, I'd probably give it like maybe a 4.5 star as a standalone. I still really enjoyed it. Out of the 3 books that I read here, it actually did make me emotional, which I don't recall if there were moments in Mr. Mercedes that made me emotional. I don't think I had any like sad emotions bubbling up reading Pet Sematary, but I definitely had a lot of feelings reading that. But I think this was the only one that kind of pulled on that heartstring a little bit, so I will give it kudos to for that. But yeah, I won't rate that just because I don't want to rate it as a standalone, but I will give an overall rating to this collection of short stories once I finish it. But I did really enjoy that as well. So, where does that leave me now that I've finished these 3 Stephen King books? Well, as I said, it's going to be really hard for me not to just continue to read Stephen King and only Stephen King for the rest of the year. But I don't want to do that for a couple of reasons. One, I have a lot of other great books on my TBR, and I do want to continue to diversify my reading. I want to read other things. I want to enjoy some other authors. There are some other books on my list that are really high priority for me to get to. And at the same time, I also don't want to burn out on Stephen King. So I don't want to allow myself to only read his stuff and then get sick of it or get sick of the genre. So I am going to try to intentionally space out my reading, but I do already have plans to pick up Finders Keepers, which is the second book in the Bill Hodges trilogy, very soon because I definitely want to finish that trilogy. So keep your eyes out for that. We may do a little continuing series I'm in the middle of vlog. But this was my vlog reading Stephen King books for a week. I've never sat down and just read Stephen King for a length of time like this. And honestly, I don't feel like I've read that many Stephen King books, even including the books in this video, just because he has such a long list. So I'm really glad that I had this opportunity to dive into more of his work. And this was such a successful reading vlog for me. I had 2 5 stars and a great short story that I read. And so if you take anything away from this, if you're interested in the horror genre, maybe check out some Stephen King. I feel like you don't need me to tell you that. He's a really popular author, but hopefully this just confirms for you what you already knew or what you've already heard. I definitely recommend his books, and I really, really enjoyed this. So that being said, if you stuck around for this vlog, thank you so, so much for watching me read and talk about these 3 Stephen King books, and I appreciate you so, so much. Let me know down in the comments if you have read Stephen King and if you have a favorite of his novels. I would love to hear from you. And if you haven't read one, maybe let me know which one interests you most and which one you might pick up. It might be on my physical TBR. Maybe we can do a little buddy read together. But that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye!